Welcome into week 8 of Fantasy Fridays, DMW Sports here with Manny. How you doing today, Manny?
I could be better. We've seen better days in DC, mostly last year, but yeah, we're going through it right now. How
Yeah,
about you? I know. Look, I just want y'all to take it easy on us this year. I mean, this week, but it is what it is. How
I
you feeling, D
completely
Mac?
understand it. I was looking forward to Mahomes versus Jay Daniels on prime time on Monday Night Football. Unfortunately, not going to be able to get that this year. And so hopefully for Jay Daniels will be back sooner rather than later, given the fact that the Commanders obviously have a tough schedule coming up in general. But I'm feeling good outside of that, man. Look, obviously Chiefs on a winning streak. Things are looking up as far as the Kansas City is concerned. But let's go ahead and lock in, get into the number one starts at each position for us as far as the fantasy football lineup is concerned. I want to make sure you guys have the best place to go ahead and get after it. I'm going to start out at a pretty odd place as far as quarterback is concerned, but I'm going with Joe Flacco. We saw what he's able to do on Thursday Night Football against the Steelers. I think there's another easy matchup against the Jets as far as that is concerned. Obviously, he understands how to get the ball out of his hands quickly and in the hands of Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. And as far as the Bengals offense is concerned, that's kind of all you need to know how to do and allow them to do the rest as far as that aspect. They've been able to give up points. The Jets defense has the wide receivers. I expect them both to have a good game as far as T and Jamar is concerned. And Joe Flacco is a viable start for you if obviously on this bye week, Armageddon of sorts, you need somebody to fill in. I think you can pick up and play Joe Flacco this week. Manny, who's your quarterback start of the week?
This week I'm gonna go. We get with Bo Nix. He has a good matchup against the Cowboys this week. He kind of struggled through the first three quarters, putting points on the board last week against the Giants. They have a little bit of a tougher defense than the Cowboys. The Cowboys they had a little bit of a better defensive showing last week against Jaden Daniels, but again, he was throwing to Chris Moore and Robbie Chosen. But this week, I think Bo Nix, yeah, I think he's going to light the board up. They caught fire in that fourth quarter last week. I think they keep the ball rolling this week.
Yeah, I understand as well. Who are you going with your running back start of the week?
Running back, with Bryce Young potentially being out, and Andy Dalton possibly starting, I think they're going to put the ball in Rico Dowdle's hands. I guess the 23rd ranked defense as far as giving up fantasy points is concerned to running backs. I think in order to keep the ball out of Josh Allen's hands, you're going to have to keep the ball. You're going to have to keep the drives going. Get the ball in your best playmakers' hands, and I think that's Rico Dowdle's right now.
Yeah, look, they've been alternating drives to this point, and Rico looked better than Chuba last week, which is somewhat to be expected. Obviously, Chuba coming back from the injury. I expect them to continue to kind of rotate drives and allow Rico to get at least split carries. And as of right now, I have no reason to believe that he won't look better again versus a bad Buffalo defense. So I understand that play. I'm going to stick with a good matchup with DeAndre Swift going up against the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously, coming out of the bye week, the Bears have found something with their run game, specifically with Swift leading the way. I understand a little bit of concern as far as his groin injury. Last week, he had a groin injury as well. Did not practice on Wednesday last week, then was limited both, Thursday and Friday, played just fine on Sunday as well. I expect that it will be a similar situation this week upcoming. I think you'll have a good opportunity to get after with DeAndre Swift. And again, trying to keep the ball out of Lamar Jackson's hands as well on the other side and getting after a bad Baltimore Ravens defense. I like the matchup for Swift. As far as my wide receiver start of the week, gonna go with Stephon Diggs. And it's gonna sound a little bit weird given the fact of how well the Cleveland Browns defense has played to this point. However, they do have a very specific weakness to slot wide receivers. I think Diggs will spend a good amount of time here. I think that he's continued to be the safety blanket for Drake May, who's obviously gotten off to a really good start. They're going to look to get the ball into Stephon Diggs' hands and be that safety blanket to make sure they can attack the Browns' defense in the very few weakness that it certainly has in the way that it's played to start out this year. Manny, who's your wide receiver start of the week?
This might be a little bit of a dart throw here, but I'm gonna go with Jalen Noel. He's my
Yeah,
guy. But I think with the injuries that they're going through, Nico Collins possibly being out, and then Dalton Schultz a little bit banged up too. He San Francisco, they've given up some big plays over the past couple weeks, and I think with Jalen Noel showing that he can be serviceable down the field as well as in the slot as well. With Christian Kirk possibly being out as well, I think he's going to get at least maybe 7 or 8 targets and a couple big plays going. So I think he's going to be a good connection with CJ Stroud.
Look, I loved what Jalen Noel put on tape versus Seattle, and ultimately that was one of the few bright spots the Houston Texans offense had versus that Seattle Seahawks defense. I completely understand that. Obviously, Nico is limited, may not even play. Higgins, like you said, also banged up too. They need some juice as far as that offense is concerned, and ideally somebody that they can get the ball out to quickly and then create something after the catch. And that's exactly what Jalen Noel is, who we also shared our love of as far as the draft process was concerned for sure. So, who are you going with for your tight end star of the week to wrap it up?
Tight end, I'm going to stay with that Dallas game. I'm going to go with Evan Ingram. I think he's been seeing some increase in targets over the past couple of weeks. He had a slow start to the season, but over the past couple of weeks, he's been showing that connection with Bo Nix there. And I think the Cowboys, they ranked 18th against tight ends. He had a almost gave a couple big plays to the tight ends last week, but again, Ertz missed a couple plays. He had some drops. I don't think they'll have that issue again. I don't think Ingram's going to have that issue this week against the Cowboys, and I think he'll have plenty of opportunities.
Yeah, I don't blame you one bit. That does seem like an interesting matchup, and obviously, like you said, sticking in the fire as far as that Dallas and Denver game is concerned. I'm going to stick with somebody that obviously has been much of a line since he's been drafted, but somebody that's actually turned in some pretty good performances. That's Mr. Kyle Pitts going up against a Miami Dolphins defense that struggled in general. It's 23rd in the league as far as giving up points to the tight end position. So I expect him to be able to have a good matchup. I think the way that a lot of teams are paying extra attention to Drake London will funnel some things to Kyle Pitts ultimately. And this passing attack probably does need a spark. And this Dolphins defense is a really good get right spot, in my opinion, for them to put some points on the board and start feeling better about the way that their Falcons offense is operating and find some consistency over there in Atlanta. So that's all we got as far as Fantasy Fridays is concerned. Make sure you check back this week for the people that you have to have in your lineup.